So what we're going to look at here is we're going to take what we've learned in the first semester and the second semester. What we've learned in the first semester was we learned about the solutions of the quantum square wave, and we use it in the numerical methods that we've learned in the second semester, the bisection and the Newton-Raphson. And then we try to find out the eigenvalues of the quantum square wave. So this is what I'll be going through today. Why we need a trial and error based method, review for the quantum square wave, the finite symmetric square wave, bound states and scattering states, even and odd wave functions, and what we need to actually remember to solve the problem. Okay, so why I'm doing this is because the problem only states whether it's a bound state or an even state or an odd state. Bound states are what we're going to be dealing with here. So we need to know what these terminologies are in order to actually solve the problem. Next, I'll be going on to numerical methods, your bisection or your Bolzano method, Newton-Raphson method, and I'll be doing two problems. Same problem actually, but using the bisection method and the Newton-Raphson method. And I'll also be looking into the physical significance of the potential in the bisection method. And then I'll be looking at a trick to solve the derivative. Rather than actually computing the derivative, we can do a trick to solve the derivative for the function. Okay, so I'm going on to why we need these trial and error based methods. So when we compute any matrix, if we want to multiply two matrices, say, we want to compute the product of these two matrices. So when we multiply them, we have a definite value that we're going to get in the end. So there is a definite procedure to multiply these matrices, a set procedure to multiply the two matrices. Now, when we're looking at trial and error based methods, we're giving it an initial condition, and then we're going to find out what the answer is for that particular initial condition. So it's pretty much like an experimental setup where you have, say, probably the temperature difference is going to affect the result of the experiment, things like that. So one thing that we have to look at trial and error algorithms is we have to stop at a certain, we never really get the exact value or the exact answer. So we look at where the error is negligible or small, and then we say, okay, fine, this error is possibly permissible. So we try to take those values. Okay, so here, what are interesting about these trial and errors is that it changes based on the initial conditions, and the solutions are hard to predict. Okay, so the thing is that when you probably have a couple of roots or f of x being equal to 0 and certain regions of a particular function, right? So when we select a point which is very close to the first root, and when we select a point which is very close to the second root, based on that, your answers can differ. So you can have the first root coming up, or you can have your second root coming up. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a problem in quantum mechanics, a standard problem in quantum mechanics, which is the finite square wave. Okay, so here I'm taking a square well, where the energy, we're looking at the energies of the particles in the square well of width 2a. Okay, one-dimensional square well, this is how it looks. So you have 1, 2, 3 regions. Okay, so how do I write this mathematically? Okay, let me just go on to how we can categorize these square wells. So what we've done in the first semester is we've categorized this into finite square well and infinite square well. What we have to notice here in particular is that we've got bound as well as scattering states in finite square well, whereas in the infinite square well, you have only bound states. So that's the major thing here to note. Okay, we're going to be solving it for bound states for a finite square well. What do you mean by symmetric and asymmetric? So basically, when you have a square well, you can draw it in two ways. Okay, you can draw it either you can draw it with equal sides to the origin. Okay, so you have, say, minus a and you have an a. What do you mean by asymmetric? It's going to look like this. So you might have solved problems where you have a 0 and L. Okay, so that is asymmetric. This is asymmetric. This is symmetric. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so how do I mathematically write this? Okay, so I write this particle lies in a potential Vx where your Vx, it's your Vx V naught represents the depth of the potential. Okay, so minus V naught for your x between minus a and a, and 0 outside that. Okay, 0 outside that. So let's move on. Now we're looking at what are bound states and scattering states. So bound state means the particle is bound inside the potential well. So your energy is going to be less than 0. When your particle is bound inside the potential well, your energy is going to be less than 0, right? So if you look at here, if your particle is somewhere here, then it's going to be a negative potential, right? So it's going to be less than 0. Now, the solutions, how do they look like? Okay, so the solutions are discrete in nature, and your wave functions in the two regions. So your wave function in this region and this region decay. Okay, in the first and third region they decay, whereas in the second region they're oscillatory. Okay, so you don't need to really remember all this, but I want to get across the point. What do you mean by bound states and scattering states, and what do you mean by even functions? This is just review. Okay, we've all done this in the first semester. So when do you say you have a particle which is in the scattering state? So when the particle is in energy greater than 0, the particle is said to be in the scattering state. Okay. And the wave functions have an oscillatory pattern in all three regions. So all these three regions, 1, 2, as well as 3, the wave functions are oscillatory in nature. Okay, so when we derived this in the earlier semester, we had taken a function where you had both sine as well as cosine, and then exploited the symmetry of this potential to choose wave functions of well-defined parity. What do you mean by that? Either even parity or either odd parity. So if you look at your cosine wave functions, they are even functions, right? If you look at your cosine functions, sorry, they're even functions, right? If you look at your sine functions, they're odd functions. So based on that, you can choose a wave function of either even or odd parity. And what do? You analyze the even and odd wave functions separately, and then you get the bound states for those even and wave functions, even and odd wave functions. Okay, so what do you see here? There is no degeneracy here, and therefore there are no eigenstates where you have even sine and cosine together. Okay, either you have just sine or you have just cosine. Therefore, you have a well-defined parity. Therefore, you don't have a degeneracy here. Okay, so this is just to illustrate to you how your even and odd wave functions look. This is not the value, this is not the picture that is there in the actual problem. This is to just demonstrate how your even parity wave functions and odd parity wave functions look, okay? It just refers to the symmetry of the wave function. Now, in your even wave function, what you need to remember is basically this. So your even wave function for the even solution has no sign components. Okay, so an even parity wave function exists at the energies that satisfy the equation. This is not your wave function. This is a solution. This is a solution that satisfies this function. Okay, so this function gives you a particular values of energy E that is for your even parity wave function. This itself is not your wave function. And similarly for the odd function, you do not have any cosine components there, right? When you have an odd, you do not have cosine components, only sine components. And for that, you have this kind of a wave function. Okay, so, you have this kind of a solution or a transcendental equation, not a wave function. So if you actually remember the derivation, you actually have a by h cross here, by h bar, in all these terms. Okay, now our idea is not to actually solve this exactly. Okay, so our idea is to learn about the computational technique that we're going to do to solve this and get the value of the eigenenergy, get the eigenvalues. Okay, so here what has been done is your h bar is equated to 1. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So these, I think you remember, if you clearly remember it, what we've done the first semester, we drew a particular graph. BRSO had kind of done this. He drew a very fancy graph for this. Okay, so you can solve it graphically or you can solve it numerically. Now we're going to solve it numerically in the coming slides. So this is what you need to commit to memory. Okay, so you need to remember this root of 2me v naught minus eb tan of a root of 2me v naught minus eb is equal to root of 2mev. This is for your even wave function. Okay, this transcendental equation gives you the energy eigenvalues for the even wave function. Similarly, this is for the odd wave function, so you have a cotangent here. Okay, so here I've equated this h bar to be 1. So this is what BRSO had done in the first semester. So he had drawn the even and odd wave functions, and then he had kind of like plotted this graphical solution here. Okay, so now we come to using these numerical methods. So the bisection algorithm, what does it do? It takes the midpoint of the interval that you've taken, cut it into half, and find out what the value of the function is at that half. Okay, so what you have here is, okay, you take one point, you take another point, and you're supposed to make sure that there is a root in between those 2 points. So if this value should be probably a positive value of the function, and this at this part you should have a negative value. So in this range, this should be a positive, this should be a negative value, and then only when you have a root somewhere in between there. Okay, not exactly in between, based on which interval you choose, it will differ here and there. So if you take this and you divide it into 2, you got an x2, so you got an f of x here. Then you take this, you divide it into 2, you got an x minus 3, so you got a point here. Then you take this point and this point again, you divide it into 2, so you got a function somewhere here. So you keep repeating this over and over again in order to get the actual value of the root. Okay, you don't really get the actual value of the root. You can only do it tending to 0. So what you need to have is your f of x basically tends to 0. Okay, so that value is called your root, right? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so this is a problem. Okay, this won't be given to you. Okay, so this part, it's not going to be given to you. You'll have to remember this or commit to memory. What's going to be given to you is this. What we're going to be doing here is, this won't be given to you. You have several bound states, right? So you'll have to remember that it is a bound state. You'll also have to remember this value that I need to find for EB is an even wave function. So this, and this you have to remember. So what you basically had in your bisection method was you had an f of x, say something like x squared minus sine x is equal to 0. Okay, you need to bring it down to this form. This is an example that we've done, I think, in the second semester, sorry. So what we have to do is, we need to bring it to that form. So you take this AB to this side. Okay? So you take this root of AB to this side and you write it in this f of EB form. Okay? So now let's move on. Okay, so first step is you need to know what your function looks like. So you'll have to plot, okay, f of EB versus EB. Okay, this is a crucial part because it takes a lot of energy to do this, because you need to keep plotting these values. You need to make sure where you can find a root approximately. Okay, and then you need to note some points or approximate values of your EB from the plot. Now you have to be careful. Why? Because your tan function can throw off to infinity. Your cotangent also can throw off to infinity or minus infinity. So you have to be very careful when you do this. Now this is a rough plot that I've done. Okay, so you can see that there is clearly a root between 0 and somewhere between 1. There is also a root between 8 and 9, I think. Yeah, 8 and 9. So what I will do is I will just blow up these 2 points for you next. Okay, so the first point, it's basically from 0 to some 0.05, somewhere in between there, that you have a root. And the next point is from 8 and 9, between 8 and 9. Okay. So now these are the values that I found. I think this has been approximated to about 5 decimal places. Okay, and this is what you have for your next point, your energy level E2. Okay, so what do we have? We have a root between 0 and 1. We have a root between 8 and 9. So what do? You bisect that interval. So what I will be doing is I will be doing it for 0 and 1. You can try it out for 8 and 9. Okay. So first I will find out the value of the function at f of 0. Then I will find out the value of the function at f of 1. So what do I see? I see this value is basically a positive value. This value is a negative value. So I get a root between 0 and 1. Okay. There is a root between 0 and 1. I know that because 1 is positive and 1 is negative. Okay, so what we had is your f of minus x is less than 0, and you had an f of plus x is greater than 0. That's what we solved. We have a positive value, we have a negative value. Okay, so what do we do now? We have to bisect that interval. So you have an x, you take this value of x plus, so you have a 0, which you got previously, plus 1 divided by 2. So what you're ending up with is a 0.5. So this is your first iteration. Okay, so you have to similarly repeat this for the next iteration. Second iteration, what do? When you take your 0.5 and substitute it into the function, okay, so your f of 0.5 is what? You get a negative value. So if you get a negative value, you know that you're supposed to be getting a positive and negative value of the function, right? So what do you take? You take your 0.0, and then next you take your 0.5. Okay, you take a 0.5 value. And then what do? You take 0 and 0.5. So here your f of x is, in this point your f of x is positive. This part your f of x is negative. Okay, so what do you get? You get a 0.25. And then you move forward. Okay, you go to the next iteration. So you know that there is a root between 0 and 0.25. So you go to the third iteration, and then you get a root between 0 and 0.125. This is your fourth iteration. So coming up to about ninth iteration, you will end up seeing that your values kind of correspond to the values that we actually found out in the graph. Okay. So just a minute. I'll go to the graph to show you how it looks. So if you see this, this is how your graph looks, okay? So you had a point here, 0.0402. So you're getting about fairly good values when you did this ninth iteration. You're seeing that you got about 0.0048, okay? So it's coming pretty close to the actual value that you got there. So now I'm going to look at what does this potential physically do. So when I change the value of my potential, what is actually happening, okay? So when we looked at the V naught is equal to 10, we found that there were two values of the potential. But when I increase the potential to say V naught equal to 50, you can see that there are three states here, okay? You can see that there are three states. So what I'll do is now I'll switch over to an animation that I'd like to show you. What happens when you actually change the potential. Okay, so this is your V naught is equal to 10, and we realize we got something like 0.004. And we got the second bound state was between 8 and 9. You can work this out. Okay, it's like an exercise to you. So you can take this, and if I change this value to about say 50, okay? If I change this value to say about 50, you realize that I have more number of bound states. Okay, I have more number of bound states. Not just that, the bound states are higher in value. Okay, that means the bound states are deeper. Okay, so I've got a 5.965, got a 33.23, and I've got a 48. So the first bound state for my V naught is equal to 10 was something like 0.04. The second bound state for your V naught is equal to 10 was around 8.5, right? So if you look at this, the bound states are not just larger in more in number, but rather that they are more deeper. Okay. So now I'll go back. I'll show you how it keeps changing. Just a minute. Okay, this is as your V naught keeps changing, how the number of bound states increases. Not just that, the value of your bound state becomes deeper. Okay, so now it's coming back to about 10.
Okay, calculate is
So we
that
see
is
what?
very nice because and also showing
What do we see? We notice that your 10 in this equation is proportional to the strength of the potential.
continue.
So what do? We have a potential which is, if we make it a deeper potential, we get a larger number of deeper bound states. And also we get the bound states as deeper. Okay, so next we're moving on to the Newton-Raphson method. So in this Newton-Raphson method, what do? We basically have to take a random guess, okay, looking at the plot that we do earlier. And then what do? Or usually what is done is the guess is given to you in the question. Okay, the first guess is given to you in the question, mostly. So what we do is we take a line, we try to find the slope of that line close to that function, and then we use the intercept as a new guess. Okay, intercept of the line as a new guess for the next iteration. Okay, so what do? We take this point, we have this slope here. Okay, we have this line here, we take it. This, if you remember, this dy by dx should give you a tan theta, and that is actually your slope, right? So what do? We take this. Okay, we take this part, we take this intercept with the x-axis, and then we use that as the value for the function new guess. Okay, so that's the value of the function's new guess, your x. Say if this gives you something like x naught, the next guess is going to be x1, and proceed forth with that. So this is more convenient than the bisection method if you're choosing a value, your initial guess, closer to the root. Okay, if you choose an initial value closer to the root, it converges quickly. So there's a rapid convergence in comparison to the bisection method. Okay, so your algorithm is equivalent to drawing a straight line. F of x is equal to mx plus b. The tangent to the curve at x value for which your f of x is equal to 0, and then using that intercept, x is equal to minus b by m as the improved guess for the root. Okay, so now what do you remember this? Okay, so you remember we did this in the second semester. We wrote lots of programs in this. Now in this, what is the main condition that you have to look at? So this is your x naught. This is your initial guess x. This is your x naught. This is your x1 minus f of x naught divided by f prime of x naught. If this guy goes off to 0, then this entire thing becomes infinity. So you have to be careful that your f prime of x naught is not equal to 0. Then only will you get a good value. So I will move on now. Okay, so this is the general formula. F of x plus 1 is equal to xn minus f of xn divided by f prime of xn. Okay, so I'm doing the same problem again here. Okay, we'll give you this. Sometimes you can write this as odd. So then you have to use the cotangent, the one with the cotangent, the solution with the cotangent. Okay, so now we will move on. Now, what's going to be a big problem here is to actually compute this derivative f prime of EB. Okay, that is the major problem here. So there is a trick to find the derivative without actually calculating this derivative. Okay, there is a trick to do that. I will show you how you can do that later on. So this is the extensive procedure of like computing the derivative in detail. Okay. So I won't be going through this. This is pretty it's cumbersome, but it's pretty trivial once you get to look at it. So this is the answer that you get. Okay. So now there is an easy method to find the derivative. What is that easy method? You basically take the basic definition of your derivative. F prime of x is equal to f of x plus delta x minus f of x divided by delta x. So your delta x is an infinitesimal value. Okay. So you take a small increment in your delta x, but you have to be careful which delta x you choose. It cannot be equal to the difference between the first guess and the second guess. Okay, you have to be very careful that you do not choose the derivative. So basically, if you have, say, your first guess is x naught, your second value that you've obtained is your x1. So your x1 minus x naught should not be equal to this delta x that you choose. Okay, so now I will move forward with this problem. Okay, so this is, I've computed this value of the derivative. Okay, so I'm just going, what am I going to do? I'm going to take your EB is basically your guess. So I take a random guess, or the guess is usually given to you in the question because it's very hard to find it. So what do? I substitute it into this f of x and find out the value. Okay, so you've done this a million times before. So it's pretty trivial after this. All you need to remember is the transcendental equations and then substitute it into this Newton-Raphson formula. So you have a 0.05, you got your f of x naught, and you got your f prime of x naught. Now, what I'm going to do later on is tell you how to calculate this f prime of x naught. Okay. So this is your first iteration. Then my next input to your function is going to be 0.039. Okay. And I realize that is giving me 0.04019. So if you remember in your plot, you remember the eigenvalue, it was 0.042, something like that, right? So if you look at this now, here, what do you get? You get a 0.0401. Gets pretty close to the initial value. When I repeat it again, I get the same value. So then you know you can stop the iteration. There's no need to do it further. Okay. So the trick that I'm going to teach you is this. Okay. So your f prime of x is equal to f of x naught plus delta x minus f prime of f of x divided by delta x to compute the derivative. So what do? I take this is some random value that I choose. Okay. So it's a very small random value. So the smaller I make this value, the better the derivative is going to become. Okay. So I got minus f of, I compute this value and I realize I get a minus 7.57091. Okay. Minus 7.57091. Okay, that's what I get. So if I look back at this, you check this out, this is your somewhat closer to this value. Okay. Now what you can try doing is you can try doing it for this derivative. Okay. You can try feeding this value in. I will show you how I did it, but you can try it yourself. Okay. So you move on to the next one. Okay. So you take your next input, which is 0.039. Okay. You take it and you compute it. You can try doing this yourself. Okay. And you realize it's pretty close to the value that we got. Minus 8.5 is something that we got over there when we computed it with the explicit form of the derivative. When you use this technique, you get about minus 8.493. Okay, so that's pretty much it. This is basically what your idea is, to use the numerical techniques, not the quantum mechanics. Use the results from the quantum mechanics and put it into these numerical techniques and find the eigenvalues. So that is the idea of this whole thing. So it's computational physics. So the initial part that I explained about the quantum square well and all is really not required. Only the solutions have to be remembered.